Welcome back to the iHealth channel, iHealth Radio, with your host, Hurricane H. New day, new show. A very interesting topic, an awesome topic, an important topic that I think we all experience some of it somehow, somewhere in our lives. And it is a topic of, abuse, but from narcissism. And we hear that word a lot. We sometimes we are with people that may have this particular syndrome, and I call it syndrome, or a behavior. But I think everybody's experienced someone in their life, and if you haven't, you're a lucky one. So I would say that. But wouldn't we have an expert who actually is a voice, for people against this type of abuse, and folks that are with this type of personality and behavior. So without any further ado, with me, I have Dana S. Diaz. Dana, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I am very excited to be here because I think it's really important to talk to people about the mind-body connection. I actually am an unfortunate expert in narcissistic abuse because I lived it. I'm a survivor of it, both in childhood and in my former marriage, which was a relationship that lasted 25 years. So the first 45 years of my life, I was abused by narcissists. But I think it's really important for people to understand my experience and what many people do experience, which is not just the mental aspects of the depression, the anxiety, the PTSD, and all these things that anybody who's in an abusive situation will likely endure, but also the physical manifestations of that stress. Because in my case, it turned, my body ended up going autoimmune, and I ended up with a lung disease that I never knew could happen just because somebody was mistreating me, to put it lightly. So I'm really focused now, since I've been out of those situations for the last 3 years, just on however I can make people aware of the reality of being in a situation, whether it's with a coworker, a family member, a spouse, it could be your parent or your child. It's unfortunate, but we really have to be aware of how our bodies are reacting to the mental stress that we're enduring, so that we can, make sure to take care of ourselves before, this reality of stress killing you, comes into play.
Wow. Well, thank you. I mean, first of all, it's amazing that you've endured for a period of time, and it's not a small period of time, and you had it a couple times whereby you just, as you get out of one, you get into another one, and that is difficult, and it is, and I'm going to ask you, because based on your expertise, were there any signs for these individuals? Now, I get it. The stepfather is one thing because it's not your choice.
Right.
You just happen to be in a world with someone else that was brought into your life. That's different. That was not a choice that you made. But on the relationship side, that was your choice. And so let's talk about the first part, like what we can tell people who have a similar situation. Mom gets somebody that comes home, and then this person happens to be narcissist. And by the way, this is, if you had this, I'm sure that your mom went through it as well. So it's actually, or if you have siblings that probably had the same problem. So that's on its own. And I know that's pretty good reality for a lot of people watching and listening, and not only in the States, I think worldwide it is happening. And then we can, I guess, go into the discussion about your personal relationship, and not only how you missed it up front and how you stayed through it, because that's 25 years is a long time, and so let's talk about the first one. Obviously you had no choice. Your mom decided that this is a person for her. They joined, now you are in one household, so were there any signs for this particular person, the stepfather?
Yeah.
That was clear?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was a child, so I didn't know what a narcissist was. I just knew, it's funny because I remember the moment that I met this man. I did not like him at all. I saw past the smiling and the trying to, impress me with little stuffed animals and things. He was fake. He was one way in front of an audience, and he was a different way behind closed doors. And, even as young as I was very aware of it. And I was also very, very feisty and very vocal. as a child. So I did stand up for myself, but that's when the physical consequences would come in, and those would start very little and increase with time and as I got older. But certainly it wasn't just this facade that he put on for people to see. The show, I always said it was like a show. He put on the show for everybody. Everyone thought he was funny, amazing, charming. He was not at home. What my mother endured, I can't speak to. I did witness definitely verbal stuff, a lot of demeaning and control, a lot of control. But he was also one of these overt narcissists that he had to have praise and admiration from everybody. When he bought a new car, I remember it was a Sunday morning and he's honking the horn driving down the street at this early hour, just so everybody would look out their window and think, who is this, jackass driving down the street this early on a Sunday morning, honking their horn? But everybody looked out their window and saw him. So he got what he wanted. He got the attention. So it was little things like that. That's what I saw from a child's perspective. And as I got older, I got wiser and I would call him out on it, and narcissists don't like when you see through them. So, that was a problem. And like I said, there was increased severity of the physical consequence as I got older. But when you're a child, it's hard because, like my mother, to back this up, we can unravel all of this. I was an unwanted teenage pregnancy. So I'm not even sure she really wanted children, honestly, because she had her tubes tied immediately after I was born and she was only 17. So there was a lot of emotional detachment from her as well. So when I would go to her, from the first incident to the last and say, this is what he said, this is what I did, let me show you the hand marks, let me show you the bruises. She was one of these that said, that's just how he is. Maybe if you didn't upset him, she would sort of turn it around on me that I was to blame, and she would enable, excuse, and tolerate. So I suspect there was stuff going on with them, but I can't speak to that, as a witness to it. But certainly she submitted to him and allowed him to control and dominate her. So it basically was kind of pitting us against each other, my mother and I. So it was them, and then there was me. And then when my mother actually had a few procedures to reverse her tubal ligation, because I was not his biological child, and it was made very clear to me that I was deficient in not being his child. So they decided to have their own. And the irony is, to address something that you did speak about, my brother is now 33 or 34 years old. I'm 48, where there's 14 years between us roughly. They raised him completely differently because they wanted him, and he was of the right, I always say he was of the right breed. He has his dad's blood, I don't. And he also is, like my mother, very submissive and allows the control and allows the domination. So it's like we had two completely different childhoods. And that's a little disturbing, but that's a typical scapegoat golden child situation. But definitely it set me up, when you grow up like that, being told every day that you're a burden, you're a bother, I shouldn't have to pay for another man's child, all these terrible things that you should not say to a little girl. I certainly knew it was wrong, and I stood up for myself, and I told him exactly what I thought of him, but I still unfortunately internalized it, because when that's all you're hearing, and even your own mother is sort of supporting that narrative in her own way, or she was negating my experience and my reality, and my internalization of it, it's hard not to kind of feed into it. So I would have very low self-esteem, and even struggled sometimes with, why am I here? What am I even doing here? What is my purpose? If nobody wanted me here and I was never meant to be, why then am I here? So it was very hard. But then I leave their house thinking, never again, I'm tough, I'm not going to do this again. And what happens is I'm a people pleaser. I'm a codependent. I am looking for somebody to attach to that's going to give me that little bit of love that I'm starving for. And that's when I meet another narcissist.
Hold on, there's quite a bit to unpack there. Before
Yes.
we get to the second phase, because you've covered quite a bit there, and I think there's a lot of stuff that audiences can benefit from in this type of discussion. One
Mhm.
is I love what you said. I mean, he came into this life first. He had a whole facade to him, and obviously in the public, that's who he is. But then internally, it was a whole different thing. But I mean, I don't want to put a blame on your mom, but the fact of the matter, I mean, there is some of that as well because normally a mom will always cover for her children no matter
Yep.
what. She's the mama bear, right?
Yep.
She's gonna take care of kids. But in this situation, there is that. And by the way, this is not it's not unheard of. We've seen them, we've heard about these stories. We even had, we have movies that were depicting these types of
Right.
situations over and over the years to just show these realities that people are going through. And you were still a very young girl. And the fact of the matter is, you said there's nothing you can do. It's not like you're going to fight. You can be vocal, you can be feisty, you can be, just loud about it. But you had no power, no authority. Like you said, I mean, there was
Right.
some punishment level, and that got worse and worse. Now, I do have a question about that.
Mhm.
Because I know, I mean, we're in a modernized world, I would say, a civilized world to a degree, whereby there's other people that watch any signs of abuse. And so, was there any indicators to anyone at school somewhere that could have flagged, some of this stuff that could have? Because I can tell you, if that would ever happen, then things may have been different because they're dispatched, child services and things like that, and those things happen. I don't know if it happened or not, but I do know
Yeah.
it can happen. And
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely. I mean, it was hard to hide some of the stuff. I would often get pulled out of class and taken to the nurse's office, and they have this lovely piece of paper for those who have not had to endure this, with just a very general outline of a human body. And the nurse would, have me pull up my sleeves and everything, and she would have to mark on this paper, the date and my name and where I had a scratch, a bruise, a handprint, whatever, the evidence was. But then it was just put away in my school file. Nobody got called, no child services, nobody called my mother, nobody called anybody. I was just put back in class and sent back home, and they had a record. Now, fast forward to when I believe I was 16, there was an incident where honestly I thought I was going to die. I was strangled and first straddled and slapped and punched and what have you, held down by my wrists and everything. Um, it was just awful. But then it was actually my mother who put her hands around my neck and strangled me, and I blacked out. I thought she was going to kill me. I could not pry her fingers from my neck, but I did realize my legs were free. So before I lost consciousness, I did kick her, and fortunately, she released me, and I just ran down the stairs and got the hell out of that house. I just ran. I had nowhere that I was going. It was nighttime. It was a weeknight. But I just ran, and I don't even remember. It's very blurry, but at some point, somebody a classmate of mine that knew me, saw me just randomly running down the street, hysterically sobbing, and asked if they could take me somewhere. They didn't ask what happened, thank God, because it's a very shameful thing to be in that situation and have to admit it. And it was just so traumatizing. You just don't want to get into it with the first person that comes along. But I was taken to a friend's house, where I safely spent the night, went to school the next day, and the cops met me at school. I was questioned, child services was involved, but I'm in the process of writing my next book, which is about all this. And I liken the whole scene at the police station to, if anyone ever remembers the movie Annie, where these two imposters, Lily and Brewster, come to claim their daughter Annie, and they're so sad and tearful, and you know, it was just such a farce. the show that my mother and stepfather put on, pretending that I'd just run away and there I was this difficult daughter that they just didn't know what to do with. And child services did question the people that worked for them because they have a business. They did question some neighbors, and everybody said what lovely and charitable and great people they are. So I was told that I could either go home to them or I could go somewhere else, and that somewhere else, without let's say a juvenile home, so to speak, in our area. The somewhere else that I was given the option of was a mental facility, where they had a floor for teenagers. I opted to go there because there was no way in heck I was going back to that house with them. But unfortunately, I was only there for a month because that's how long the insurance would cover before I was released. But it was even that was traumatizing. My roommate there was a 12-year-old girl she was in there because she stabbed her best friend to death. So I go from one unsafe, very, feeling very vulnerable situation to another where I had to sleep with an eye open at night. But I'm very fortunate that the people there saw my situation for what it was. And in fact, it's not even funny, but there was somebody there that I knew, and it was another classmate from my high school that had disappeared a month before. Nobody knew what happened to him. Nobody knew where he went. Nobody could get a hold of him. And there he was. The next morning when I went to breakfast, there he was. And I said, "What happened? Why are you here?" And it was a similar situation. His mother lied to the police. He had a situation with her being drunk and was trying to protect her from harming herself. And she decided, I guess that's what people with a little bit of money do, is they put their kids in mental facilities as punishment instead of grounding them. But at least I had somebody there who, we could kind of lean on each other for support. But even the doctors and the staff there, were very aware that, we were clearly victims. And not necessarily there because, certainly there were things to work through, but not to the extent to some of the, other people that I was going to say inmates, but the patients that were there. But it felt like a prison because this is, it's a very scary situation to go from my mother just tried to kill me last night to you're supervised in the bathroom and you're supervised when you're eating and you can't have pens or shoelaces or anything sharp, that you might hurt somebody with, and you can't make phone calls and you can't, it's very restrictive. So to come out of a narcissistic abusive situation where everything's controlled and restricted to another, at least I guess I was used to it to some extent, but it was a very hard situation. It was a rough phase of my life. But that certainly clinched it for me that I knew when I was 18 and legally able, I was walking out the door. I was not going to remain with my mother in her home with him.
I don't know where to
I
go
know.
from here. It's really too much, but
Yeah.
that you had to endure, and you're actually sharing not only, your story is the main, but even through here, you've covered a couple of stories within, your friends or at least your colleagues or your, schoolmates who had
Yeah.
similar, dilemma. And by the way, you were mentioning the age of 16 here. So, and you also stated early on that you were, I guess, a child of a teenage pregnancy. And so now we can talk about this, for a minute, which is, it is a phenomenon
Right.
that's happening more and more. There are a lot more teenagers with kids,
Yeah.
and it's unfortunate because, are they, capable? Are children capable of having children? And that's a fact. Yes, they, society can say they can. There's a lot of support and so on and so forth. That's maybe the financial piece. Maybe, some that the system has some of these, conduits, but it's not, there's no emotional support, there is no protection when it comes to, like, like in the case of stepfather, or the mental
Right.
status of it, because the fact that you're always going to be reminded that, my daughter, I don't have to raise somebody that is not mine. You were not want, you were unwanted, you were a mistake. I mean, that in itself, I can guarantee you, if we have, and you did go, to a psychiatry or mental clinic,
Yeah.
literally,
Yeah.
for which, but that's, I'm gonna talk about that too, because that drives me nuts. But the idea that first you went, with bruises and no one did anything about it the first time or early on. I mean, to me, that's mind boggling, because the fact of the matter, you know, we all hear that if you were even to touch a child, and they have things, they don't have to talk to you. They'll dispatch child services to the home. They do the investigation stuff. But you're
Right.
right. They camouflage it well, and I get the concept. They're the adults, so you're the child. Maybe you're just hallucinating or delusional, whatever the word would be used. So that played to their favor. But then at 16, this was clearly, you were out running out. And of course, they can say she had a fit, she left. I mean, it's your word
Mhm.
against theirs. I mean, I'm sure that's what transpired. What I don't get
Exactly.
is the fact is that you were not able to find another home. I mean, they could have offered foster care, for example, right? And that wasn't an option. I mean, for you to be given the only other formality is a mental health clinic and being, I guess, preview to a world that you shouldn't have, because I mean, it is not a picnic, as you said. It does, from what we see, at least from documentaries and shows and things like that. I mean, these places, they do look. I mean, like Gotham Asylum. you know, they're very,
Yeah.
doors closed, bars, padded in the
Yeah.
rooms.
High
So I mean,
security.
yeah, I mean, it's high security. So I mean, you mentioned the word inmate. I mean, it's not a big difference between one or the other, and the
No.
risk is just as equal, because you still can get, you never know who's there. I mean, mentally, someone could be challenged, and they may not even be able. So putting you there, I mean, to me, that would have been putting you in harm anyways. But again, I'm not an
Yeah.
expert, and I guarantee if we have an expert with us in this discussion, and I might, looping this into our next show with Dr. Heim, maybe he gives us his insights on this.
There
But
you
it is
go.
it it is a tough one, because you're a child still. I mean, 16. I mean, people don't. He would say we don't even get our front lobe ready until 25. So at 16, you're completely clueless a lot of things,
Exactly.
and you are afraid. You have nowhere to go, and this is where the system is taking you. I mean, for people that are watching and listening, folks, first of all, if you're a teenager, I mean, maybe it is smart not to have kids, one, because you can prevent a lot of this stuff from happening originally, right? But if it happens, know that also they will suffer, and that's not a good idea, because here's the thing: you are a true testament of where this can happen, and it's serious. It's not easy. You were subjected to a lot of stuff, and I can just imagine the pressure, the mental status on it, the mental, pressure that you have, and you have to deal with this, and you have to absorb all this stuff. Not everybody is capable of taking. I mean, you could have ended your life literally, and we hear stories
Yeah.
about teenage suicide. Many people just get overwhelmed. They don't know what to do, and they do something that is that
Right.
really end of life kind of concept and extreme. So I'm glad that you actually made it through. I mean, at least
Well, thank
we have the second phase, and we're going to talk about that. But really, it is your story is a story that can affect a lot of folks out there. And listen, folks. I mean, if you bring a kid to the world, you have to be responsible with that kid. I mean, that's all there is. Listen, I'm a father, and listen, I do believe in discipline and so on and so forth. That's one thing, but not abuse. I do believe in family stuff. And by the way, I had stepchildren personally, and I'm still in a good relationship with them. Just to give you an example, right? But it is unfortunate to see like it was that extreme, right? In where this
Yeah.
was totally narcissism and abusive, and all the stuff didn't make sense. It's sad to hear it, but it's reality, and a lot of people are going through it. And maybe someone out there can see the light and can see at least the signs, and maybe prevent something of this happening to their children. Whatever the case may be. And frankly, if you can't raise your kids, maybe someone else can. At least they'll offer them a better life. And so
Yeah.
that's the other part. I mean, there are a lot of ways of
And that's
dealing
at
with this.
any age. I hate to interject, but
No, no,
that's at
please.
any age, because I think there's even, I know some young mothers and they love their babies very much. My
Of course.
mother just didn't want me. And if you don't want a child, I don't care if you're 17 or 27 or 37, there are so many people, there are so many women who are unable to have their own biological child that would take that baby and love it and raise it like it was their own. And it would be such a better situation for that child.
For both,
But,
right?
that's the thing. And the other part of it is what my experience was, we have to remember that was back then. I mean, teachers could still smoke at recess with the kids around, and kids were beating each other up in front of, it was just a different time. So I feel like there was a lot more that was accepted that wouldn't be accepted now. So maybe the system works better now, but it did not work for me.
Well, you're referring to the 90s, I'm assuming, right? And I have to say, I mean, there
I
were
was born in the 70s.
no, I guess that's the 80s, right? When you're
Yeah,
16.
growing up in the 80s. Yeah.
All right, so yeah, maybe you're right. It was a little free for
A
all
little
then.
part of
It was still up for that. I mean, that's true. The 90s, I know they started getting a little tougher and things like that. Because I can tell you a story. This happened, where, um, you know, uh, my stepdaughter, she hit a door literally, and th- the child services were dispatched to the home, and
Oh
uh,
my.
and they came and they investigated. I mean, we didn't even know. They showed up, And so I can tell you, this was in the 90s, and they were still, they were aware of things and they had situation control. And so when they see something, and then this was literally that's exactly what happened. There was no lie to it. We didn't make it up. It just happened to be a simple accident, but. For them, they
Right.
needed to investigate. They sent a social worker home. They did a full assessment. Then they dismissed that. There was nothing. So I can tell you, I've seen that happen, in real life where they do. That's why I asked, like, they should have been dispatched because, and in
Yeah.
your case, it wasn't. But again, the 80s, maybe the services were not as robust. And you're right. Today, you wouldn't even breathe if you did something like this. You'll be done. I
Right.
mean, and they'll remove you from your parents, and you might even wind up in jail. So there's a whole different world today. So in a way, it's good. I mean, there's other sometimes the good and the bad get shuffled in this system, and you sometimes get the short end of the stick regardless, even if they're good. It happens to be the wrong way. Some kids can also abuse that and use it against. So there's all kind of
Yeah.
stuff. I mean, it's one way or the other, and you're right. Like at that time, maybe they didn't believe you. Like you partly is spoiled brat. You don't want to deal with the stepdad.
Yeah.
And so people will turn that against you, and it's the adult versus the child, right? So that also had a different weight then.
Exactly.
So I get it, but again, today, though, it's different. And I love what you said that there are mothers or women that may not have kids. They would love to have kids. They just can't physically have children. And therefore, if you can't, someone can't. Adoption is
Yeah.
legal and you can make it correctly and you can have, and then that person may not have the burden to deal with, an unwanted situation and maybe prevent them and the child heartache and mental, I guess, problems, right? So it is something that can happen. And so again, now you went back after this whole incident. How was that experience? I mean, coming back, it's probably gonna be you're in trouble right now. I can just imagine, you coming back home. You see how it went. I can see a whole picture of like how it happened. I mean, I
It
know
was,
we'll spend a minute about this.
yeah, it was quiet. Nobody had anything to say. I wasn't about to open my mouth, and I got a lot of silent treatment throughout my childhood, but I certainly got it then. But the interesting thing was that I think once you're on the radar for child services and at the school, and now other parents, I spent the night at a friend's house. Now the other parents know. So sort of being on the radar,
Oh, careful.
nothing happened again.
Sure. Well, that
So
thank God. So it had to happen for it to stop. Well, so I have a question for you. How did that impact your school? Academic, level. Because I mean, if you're not 100% and dealing with all this, how your school? I mean, I know there's got to be an impact. You're not going to be focused. You're going to have. I mean, that's the other thing. Like, no one picked it up. That's tough.
and you're right, but I'm going to just be honest and without sounding conceited or like a slacker, but
Like
I
it already.
never
Go for
really
it.
tried. Even in first grade, they wanted to move me up to third grade because I was too smart. I was one of those kids in class that when Bobby had to read the paragraph and he can't say a word and he can't read, as fast as I could, I would get impatient. you know, I was that jerk of a kid that's like, come on, Bobby, this is the word, spit it out.
Well, that's
But
good. That's good
I
news.
never I never had to try too hard. So it was hard to focus, but I never had to try too hard. I just always did very well on tests and always did very well. I was honor roll, and I didn't have to try too hard. Thank goodness for that. But yes, it was hard mentally a lot of times, especially in high school when this stuff was happening. You've got hormones going on, you have this stuff going on at home. There were times where I was just crying so much that teachers would pull me out of class and say, what is going on? You can't be in class crying like this. And, they would send me to the nurse, and the nurse would tell me to go lay down and relax and calm down, or just tell me to go home. And I would, just go to my room and kind of isolate myself. But that's really where the focus and where the effect was with me. But I could see where somebody who did have to try harder academically would look, because I couldn't even think about the academics. I just was one of those kids that I'd show up in class. Oh, we have a test. Okay, I'll take the test, and I did well. But if I didn't have that ability, it would have probably been a big issue.
Well, I think that ability is also maybe a result of you from childhood being compensating, I guess. And because that could be the case too. I mean, again, I can't judge that. I mean, we'll
No,
have to have someone.
definitely. I was an overachiever because I was trying to get approval constantly. I was trying to get approval. Nothing was ever good enough to them, but nothing was ever good enough to me. I had to do everything perfectly. I had to score the top test. When I was playing viola, I had to be first chair, not just in one orchestra, two orchestras. I had to get the solo. I had to be the top because something would have to impress my mother and my stepfather and make them love me. But at this point, I'm 48, and I've decided that I could win the Nobel Peace Prize, and they will not be impressed. So I give up. I'm okay with who I am. I'm good. I'm not trying to seek their approval. But when you're a child, you always want your parents to think, give you some praise and encouragement and support, but it was never going to happen with me. I had to be the nothing that they thought I was for them to feel okay with what they were doing to me, is what I've summed up.
So I have a question. You did mention your sibling who's not a kid. I mean, he's old enough. Is there a relationship that you have together, or it's kind of cut off because of the family feud?
I've basically been exiled from every family. Some of my mother's family, my grandma, my godmother, some cousins that are aware. And I don't even like to say it this way, but that, see how I have been villainized and victimized. They absolutely are in my life, but most other family has subscribed to this narrative that my mother and stepfather continue to perpetuate, which is that I don't know what I'm talking about. Nothing I said ever happened. My entire reality is delusional, and so on and so forth. So we are completely estranged. My brother, we tried. He is mature and very well educated and very reasonable. I'm very proud of him, and I'm very thankful, most importantly, that he did not endure what I did, because that was my concern when they brought this baby home, was what business do these people have with a baby? But thank God they raised him like parents should raise a child. So he thinks they're the best parents ever. I did not have that experience. We have tried to have a relationship regardless of our parents. But unfortunately, it's a typical narcissistic tendency to hit people against each other. Narcissists want you on their side, and they don't have the mental capacity to allow somebody the freedom or space to associate with the person they don't, want them to. So, which would be me in this case. So, let's put it this way. In the last year, I have had 2 text messages from my brother, one on Christmas and one on my birthday. Merry Christmas, happy birthday. Thank you. That's our relationship.
Well, listen, I mean, it is a tough one. You're basically an only child, and so I mean, there's a way to look at
I'm
it. Yeah.
basically an orphan.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
actually, yeah. I mean, I I couldn't go there, but
Yeah.
you
No,
can.
I hear you.
You know, but certainly, yeah, it is. I mean, listen, I'm an only child, so I can tell you sometimes it's a benefit, because you don't have to
Yeah.
deal with those sentiments, and like you have to wonder. I don't have an experience in it, so I can tell you, like, my kids, they have their siblings. I cannot even relate to them because I don't know what it looks like to have a sibling, right? Or what it feels. So I can
Right.
relate to that. So I mean, sometimes I do say to myself, I was lucky because I didn't have that. But sometimes I
Exactly.
think I'm not lucky because, like, sometimes, like, my kids, well, there's no uncle for us, right? Well, they do have an uncle, not from the mom's side, but not from my side, right? So it's a weird thing, but it is unique. But I learned to live on my own and have
Right.
good people in my life that kind of
Yeah.
compensate, for that missed, opportunity of
Yeah.
brotherhood, sisterhood. So I have that, but it's just you find it elsewhere in the cousins, in friends, and you sometimes you get luckier, believe it or not. So because I've seen, even again, siblings can have problems too. So
I agree 100%. I love my brother, but I one thing I have learned in this life is that you cannot force somebody to be somebody they don't want to be. My mother did not want to be my mother. She wanted to be my brother's mother, and that applies to any relationship. But I agree with you. I have come to terms with that. There are other people in my life who choose to love me and accept me and think I'm perfectly wonderful exactly as I am. And I don't have to please them or prove anything to them. And they have no biological obligation to love me. So that's even better than having your mother's love. Because, yeah, your mother's supposed to love you. Even serial killers have their mothers sitting behind them in court, even after they've dismembered 12 bodies, because that's their kid and they love them. And that's what motherhood should be. And it's just not that way for everybody, but there's always somebody. I'm very fortunate. I have grandma, I have my godmother, and they're like the 2 mothers in my life. And yeah, I have a cousin who is more like a big brother to me. And I'm just so fortunate to have so many people in my life that are that provide that family that I need. They just may not be biologically related.
so an interesting question.
Mhm.
So ultimately you got into your adulthood, 18, luckily you made it, and you left the, I guess, the nest, you know, or whatever, or the hell, whichever
Yeah,
definition you want to
yeah,
refer to. But now you were free in a way. Um,
yeah,
and but in a way you were not free because what you were looking for is to compensate. And so you looked for love elsewhere, and here comes your next problem. and
yeah,
almost equal, a little bit even longer than your first phase, with somebody
yes,
else. Now this is not a blood person. This is a stranger that comes to your life, which relationship, that's what they are. Two strangers meet and they make the best of a relationship. They become almost blood. You know, um, in
yes.
in your case, you had all the signs in your first childhood. Maybe it's different because you seeing a stepfather, in a way it's different. Seeing a different man, you might not have recognized the same signs. I think that could be one. And again, I'm not the expert. We can defer that to someone. And please interject if you see the show, watch the show, and you have psychiatry expertise. Please chime in and give us some advice. Give our audiences some feedback here because I'm clueless. But the idea is, I can tell that and it is not just you. This happens all the time. We have one
Oh yeah.
problem, we seek the solution somewhere else, and the first person that opens the arms, we jump in, and boom, and now we're stuck, because we don't know what it is. And sometimes you are unable to see that it's not the right fit because you so badly want it to happen and to succeed, to be it, that you don't want to see all the signs and stuff. Is that what happened to you?
It is and it isn't. I saw everything right from the get-go. I met him. Within a few seconds, they say you judge a person. And my first thought when I met him was, oh my gosh, he reminds me of my stepfather. No, thank you. But, because I mean, the arrogance was there, the entitlement was there. He was very aloof. And, you know, the arrogance alone was so off-putting. And it's not like he was like Brad Pitt, like handsome or anything. But I let's just put it this way. I was desperate. I just wanted somebody to love me. So when he did show interest after that initial meeting, I told myself, maybe I'm being too judgmental. Maybe it's me. If I give it a shot, it doesn't, I always tell people, you don't have to marry him, just go out on the date. Yeah, well, I did, and I did marry him. But even from the beginning, I mean, from the get-go, that first, everything was off. It was all wrong. I basically turned into my mother. I was enabling, excusing, and tolerating. Well, maybe he had a bad day. That's why he had the angry outburst. Maybe if I didn't push him or say that or do this, he might be more pleased with me and not react so badly. Maybe, but the difference, because there's different types of narcissists. My ex-husband was a covert narcissist. So he would do what they call love bombing. He knew exactly what to say and do to make me feel very special and make me feel, I felt like I was on top of the world, very in love, all the butterflies. And, there were some beautiful moments. I look back now, though, and realize they were fake, because when I didn't do something right, and sometimes I had nothing to do with something, but everything was blamed on me, because here again, I was the scapegoat for all that was wrong in his life. It was bad, but it was a love-hate. Whereas in my childhood, they just did not want any part of me. There was no love whatsoever there, not even like. Whereas at least here, I was getting love, and then sometimes I wasn't. But then I would write it out, because then I would get love again. And I hate to say, it was like training a dog. I knew what to do to get the love, and I knew what not to do, and so forth. So it was kind of like creating these unspoken rules. And we'll call that manipulation, because that's generally what that is. But I did go along with it because I met his parents within the first week. He had me meeting his parents. I was moved in just over a month, and his parents were the loveliest people you could ever meet. And I think looking back, I fell in love with his parents more than I fell in love with him. And I honestly, after meeting them and seeing they were just the nicest. They were like Beaver Cleaver nice. They were just perfect. And I thought, there is no way my perception of him is right, because these two people could not have possibly created the monster that I think I'm with. So I had all this self-doubt going on. And of course, he's using, gaslighting and all these manipulative tactics to make me think that it's me. And 25 years later, there we were, and nothing had changed. It had only gotten worse. So yeah, I stayed because there were still good times in there. There was still what looked like love. Whether it was love or not, I'm not sure. I don't think so, but I was just one of the, I just wanted that forever. I think we all do. I wanted stability and I wanted security. And even if that stability meant, being in a situation where it was just intermittent, it was better than what I had in my childhood. And it was enough for me, at least in the beginning.
Well, so Dana, I mean, you were 20. I did the math. I'm not sure if I'm right.
Yeah.
So you were 20. So technically you didn't have a lot of room.
I was 19. Yeah. But okay. Yeah, just going on 20. So yeah.
So well, I mean, I tried, because you said 3 years and close. More or less. Yeah. So
still very young though.
Exactly. So you really didn't have any form or role model that you will, connect with, because everything you've experienced was hard. And as you said, here's the same sign, but here's the parents that look good, they feel good. There's some it was a different version of narcissism, if you want to call it that way. There was like a raw one,
Yeah,
and this is like a moderate version, or like a camouflage version, right? So
right.
so it's kind of weird, but in essence, you had like almost now. Someone could say, well, maybe because you've experienced that, all you saw is that. Is that a possibility, or was it really what it is? It was
Oh
narcissism.
no, it was really what it was. And all I can say, it's very hard to unravel that whole 25-year experience, but it absolutely was. And I didn't even recognize it, unfortunately, until almost the end. But I wrote a book about my experiences, and it's very disturbing to me how many people have been able to relate to it, because narcissists tend to operate the same way. But again, it was somebody that needed, I think he had a deep-seated insecurity himself, that he felt less than. He did not feel good enough in his own childhood. Um, and so he sought to fulfill his ego and feel that sense of importance that he wanted to feel by dominating me and controlling me, and kind of manipulating me into these situations where I would then be praising him and dependent on him for whatever. So it was definitely, and there was a lot of abuse there. I mean, with narcissism, like I said, I had some sexual abusive experiences with him. There was financial abuse, legal abuse. There was so much. There was domestic violence. So he basically, all in all, wanted to instill fear in me that if I leave or if I tell anybody what he is doing behind closed doors, there's going to be a consequence. And by the end of our 25 years, the consequence was death. He wanted me dead. And I have emails and I have voicemails and I have text messages that prove that. And I had to provide those in court 3 times. I had to go until I was finally granted an order of protection that said that he had to stay 10 feet away from me. But he was stalking me. He was showing up at my house at night. It was a very, very disturbing situation. Narcissist or not, it was not a situation I would ever want anybody to be in.
Was he ever open to maybe seeing a doctor, and or he was not open to even the idea that he was, in a narcissistic, way? I mean, I guess that's the first rule, right? You're never wrong as a narcissist. It's everybody else is wrong by
Exactly.
you. I got it.
Exactly. And I've had many people say, how do I know I'm not the narcissist? And my answer is, if you even ask yourself that question, you're not the narcissist, because the narcissist won't even think that. The narcissist doesn't care. The disturbing thing, I think people don't realize, narcissists literally have no empathy and no remorse. They feel 100% justified in what they're doing. Their moral compass tells them that it's okay to be treating other human beings this way. And somehow it is the fault of the victim. That is, I mean, you can call it whatever you want. It is a mental health problem. It is a psychotic disorder. It is antisocial. And I mean, let's be real. Over 20% of the male prison population in the US today are males with narcissistic personality disorder. Now, are they going to go and get diagnosed? No. If you try to get any narcissist to go to any therapist of any kind, the only kind you'll usually find them in is at the marriage counselor. And their only reason for going there is to make sure that you look as crazy and that, they need to be the victim. They want to witness that, they're going to sit there and provoke you so that they call it reactive abuse. That they want you to react in a certain way so that now a therapist, a marriage counselor, is going to say, oh, you can't treat somebody that way. And I had that experience, except I was not abusive in the marriage counseling. It's just that he was putting on, again, the show, the fake tears, saying things that weren't true at all. But I just sat there and listened because I wasn't going to defend myself. I got to a point where, with all these narcissists, there's nothing you can say or do that's going to change their perspective or change their mind. You are not going to convince them to treat you any better, or that you deserve better, or that you're worth more. They don't care. And as a matter of fact, the most recent narcissist in my life, which is a former friend and former for sure, our last interaction, she actually said to me, she screamed it, but she said, "I don't even feel bad for all the things I've done to you. And let me tell you, she has wreaked havoc in my life." So these are not people who, you and I, we have a conscience. We would feel badly about causing somebody pain, whether intentional or not. We would feel badly about, let's talk about domestic violence, even, bringing knives and guns into a situation. Most people are not going to do that. So when these people, when I say they have no empathy and no remorse, these are people that truly have no bounds, and the rules don't apply to them and the law doesn't apply to them. And that's when they get scary.
First of all, you said something that's scary in its own. After multiple court dates, whatever, the judgment is only 10 feet away. That's like being across the street from me right now. On the hallway,
Not even. Yeah,
10 feet is I could reach her in 10 feet.
I know.
It's as bad as it gets. Really. But it's been 3 years, so luckily nothing happened, and he's been gone and you've moved on. But
Right.
25 years of enduring this. It is. Listen. I don't know what to tell you. Obviously, you suffered through it, and you said. There's sexual abuse, there's physical abuse, and again, I still can't get my head around the idea that the law and the system didn't do anything to protect you. From the first instance, and on the flip side, we hear all these situations where if you touch someone, we talked about rape, we talked about certain things in different shows, and it's very clear if you cross that line, you can be in trouble very easily. And in your case, he was able to get away with literally, close to murder. It's amazing.
Yes, yes, exactly. Now, in our situation, and this is very common with victims of abuse or domestic violence, you're too scared to report. You're not going to tell the authorities, never mind your sister or your mother or, the lady at church what's going on, because you are terrified. If they find out, yeah, I was concerned going home after, the mental health facility when I was a teenager. But if I go and report, that my husband with a gun or a knife or whatever he was doing, and the police come knocking, or I file a report, oh, heck no, I'm not playing with that. I was afraid. So I never made a report. And my son, our son, but I say mine, he didn't witness half of the stuff that went on in that house. Thank goodness. But based on what he did see when he was roughly 13, 14 years old, out of nowhere, we were just driving home one night. And he said, "Mom, will you promise me something?" I said, "Sure, of course." And he said, "I know you're going to divorce Dad one day." He said, "Do not divorce him until I'm off to college." Because he said he's going to make life a living hell and I don't want to be here for it. And, I didn't want to put my son through that either, because when you are dealing with somebody that is violent and does think he's above the law, you don't want your children to be a part of that. So it was a countdown for me. Just get through, and people say, "Why did you stay? Why did you stay?" Well, one, I was afraid to leave. Two, I was staying because I thought I was being a good mother, giving my son both his parents. You don't get married to get divorced. There's all kinds of things. Your families are intertwined. You build a life together, all this stuff. But I was just trying to get through till my son was off to college, done with high school. And then that was it. Done, gone, end of story. But unfortunately, things just progressively got worse. And once COVID hit and we were stuck in the same house together and things escalated even more, that was an interesting time. I was very sure by the text messages and the emails, and just our verbal interactions that I was very sure he was going to try to do something to me and make it look like an accident, to the point where I was reporting to a friend by, I think it was 8 or 9 a.m. every single day. And her instruction was that if she didn't hear from me, to call the police because it was him and make sure it was him. And I also started keeping a journal, and I kept it hidden under the couch cushion in the basement because I moved to the basement also. I don't want to be anywhere near this man, because I wanted to have some record of what was going on. But yes, the authorities failed me again, because even though I had never called the police on him, I'd never filed reports. When we did finally have a situation, and mind you, this is after COVID and the courts reopened, I got the fastest divorce known to man. 3 weeks. I was divorced, and it was actually over a month after the divorce that we had 2 incidences within 3 nights. One involved a knife, that he showed up in the middle of the night. And fortunately, my son, well, I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate, but my son got in the middle of it, put me, to protect me, put me in a room, and went to deal with his knife yielding father, and got him to go away without incident. But then 3 nights later, my ex showed up knowing that my son was not there at the house with me that night. And he made a scene outside. I ignored it. I wasn't going to engage in this. But then he started shooting a gun outside my bedroom window. And I did call the cops. I had 6 squad cars at my house, from 3 different towns. And they didn't take him away. And mind you, in the divorce, I didn't want anything but my kid. I didn't care about the house, the cars, the money. I could replace everything but my kid and I. I just wanted my kid. But my ex did not want the house. He, they love to do these noble things. So my son could stay in his childhood home through the rest of his high school education, which was good. I was glad for that. But I was the only one on the deed and title of that home, yet they would not remove him from the property. They would not arrest him. I could not press charges. He was blatantly drunk as well, but they said they couldn't charge him with a DUI or anything, because when they arrived, they couldn't find the gun. They couldn't find the shells because it's in the middle of the night and we live out in the country, so it's pitch dark. I was told that I should put up cameras, because if I had taken video with my phone or caught anything on camera, they would have evidence that they could do something. And I said, I'm sorry. I was busy on the phone with 911, hysterically sobbing, thinking this man was going to break into my house and kill me. I was not thinking to stand at the window with my phone and take a video of what was going on. And I said, surely in the 1950s and 60s and 70s, women in these situations did not have phones to take video. And surely these men were arrested. And I was told, no, they couldn't help me. They couldn't remove him. And he refused to leave my property. So I had to leave my house that he just shot outside my bedroom window, threatening to kill me. I had to leave my house that night and go somewhere else. It's just astonishing to me. And then 3 court dates it took me, 3 appeals to get that really sad order of protection to stay 10 feet away from me.
There's no words to describe, what your
No.
ordeal here, because, I'm listening to you, like, I'm just trying to, like, because you hear different stories about, like, domestic, violence, and how the police will deal with it. And if you scream at someone, you crash something, you can still be arrested. Yet here, somebody is discharging a firearm in front of the house and still yet not getting anything. I don't know, but it's I'm not sure. I mean, maybe it's state to state. It varies. So maybe
It
it's
is.
your state.
It
Yeah,
does vary state to state, and I'm not sure if it varies in different counties as
probably
well.
too.
And
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
kind of in a little farm town. It's kind of like the good old guys club sometimes, whereas I think maybe in a bigger city, like, my biological father is a retired Chicago cop, they're probably a little more diligent about, paying attention to these things. But it is unfortunate because, in my life, I mean, thank God I'm here and I'm good, and I want to be an example to other women and men, that you can overcome anything. Certainly there's people that have been in much worse situations, but life can still be good no matter where you came from. But I hate to say the authorities have not done a very good job of protecting me in my life, as a child or as an adult. But you know, you just have to make your own way. And I think that's where um, I get a lot of people asking me, about things they can do to protect themselves. And, it is just a matter of, like I said, keeping a record, keeping a journal. I did end up going and, Amazon is great, $100 and you've got a few Blink cameras that, take recordings, and you get the app on your phone and the Ring doorbells. But you have to remember, we didn't have this stuff 15, 20 years ago. We just have it now. And you never think that you would be in a situation where you have to actually provide proof of that. It's just a shame that true victims like me have to, fall in that category where the burden of proof is on us, because probably other people in the past have lied about
Of course.
being in similar situations. And, I should be able to just point and say, this happened and this is the person that did it, and they're taken away, especially since my ex had a record already. He had been in jail a few times and he had had a DUI. So he was no angel on paper like I am. I know my halo's a little crooked, but you can see it. It's still there. But
Well,
but it's unfortunate that so many people do experience that lack of protection, where you think that the resources are there and you can call somebody for help, and that help isn't there. You really do have to fend for yourself sometimes.
like I said, I mean, it's a difficult thing. By the way, I know you mentioned something very important. I mean, goes both ways. I mean, it's not always men
Yeah.
versus women. Women can do the
Yeah.
same to men. So for people that are listening, this can be anyone, and it's unfortunate. I'm not an expert to give advice, but the way I look at it, if I don't vibe with you well, I mean, I shouldn't be with you. And if I see the signs, and you're right, I mean, the signs were there, then you kind of try to compensate to see like the good, so the bad, and you chose that, there was more good than bad, and you accepted it. Then you have a child, in the process, and now that's the other thing. When you have kids, a lot of families stay together because of their children,
Yeah.
regardless of the relationship, and it is a difficult thing. I mean, divorce exists for a good reasons to sometimes, separate, the two parties, so there's no stuff, and the kids can still have, access to both parents at all times. Of
Right.
course, if you did it in a nice, amicably, situation, things can be open for both. So there's a lot of ways to do it, to deal, but it doesn't always work, in that way. In your case, so sad to hear that I was going to ask you if you had kids, as a mother yourself, being going through what you've gone through when you were younger, and you did have a child. That's beautiful. And I'm assuming now he's gone and he's on his own to college, right?
Yeah.
Am I correct? Right.
Yeah,
But
well,
but but
he's
the,
graduated already. He's doing very well. Um, my only regret is that I feel like he is so mature, and his personality is almost too even. He does not react, but not even joyfully. He doesn't react negatively or positively. He's just kind of your very even Steven, and very diplomatic between me and his dad, which I appreciate. But I could tell when he stopped smiling and stopped being a kid, because he was dealing with some grown up serious stuff at home. And I wish that I it wasn't that I wasn't strong. I was faithful. I felt that I knew what I was getting into, and that I had to try and hope and pray and wish and try to do all the, if I can change, if I can do this, things will be better. And it was never going to be. But he is doing very well, as unscathed as a person can be coming out of it. I am glad. I don't know if he's just lucky, if I got lucky, whatever, but he's doing okay. And he does have a relationship with his dad. Because
That's
like he
wanted.
said, that's his dad. And he is very aware of who his father is, but I think he feels almost protective over his dad. And he's even said, I'm remarried to a longtime friend now. And he's like, well, you have your husband, but who does dad have? He needs somebody on his side. So I feel like my son has kind of taken that caretaker role for his dad, which he shouldn't, but he's doing well. And that's what matters. He's doing well.
Well, I mean, as a mother, you feel good about your son and his
Yeah.
outcome, and that's good. And by the way, you're right. I mean, again, your story is a story of millions, and you're not. This is a unique situation for you, but it repeats itself. Over and over, and
Oh,
people
over and over.
are having the same problem all over the place. And the sad thing,
Yeah.
if just hearing you for the last hour plus, is that it started with your parents and then he went into you and now your kid. Now imagine your son and family and things and then their kids. There's always an impact and it's a ripple effect that can continue mentally and physically, affecting someone. He might not see it, but you're right. Like you said, he's even. His emotions are, closed because he is unable to really be himself. That can also be an effect on things. So we don't know the type of level of damage that can happen from these types of pressures and stresses, and they can really have a serious impact on anyone. And you're right, sometimes because of one situation you run into a different situation thinking it's a good situation because you just want to save your life, and then you just fall from, like, you go from fire to ice, and you can just equally die in ice as well. So
Yeah.
it's dangerous, and but it is real, folks. If you're watching or listening, see the signs, know the signs, and don't just it's very difficult, or seek help early on. Don't let it linger where you're literally caught up in it. And yes, I mean, I know the system, the authorities did not in your case help, at best, but sometimes they do in cases that we've
Sometimes
heard.
they do.
Yeah, some
Yes.
cases they work. You never know how it works, but you just don't allow it. And of course, having a support system and people that are in always around you can be also a deterrent from these things. Of course, it doesn't protect you within your home, and there's nothing that you can do. It's really you and them. And it is. I mean, this world is just, there's so much stuff in it. It's sad, but it is what it is. I mean, we got to deal with it. I mean, sadly, you had to endure this. It's not like you picked, this battle from the beginning. You were put into a world with the situation. You handled it the best you could in time, and the good news is now you're free. Now you did
Yeah.
something. Not only you're taking this on the road by helping and trying to guide people and giving people awareness,
Yes.
but also you wrote a book, and your book is "Gasping for Air: The strangle
Stranglehold.
stranglehold of narcissistic abuse." I mean, that's a big that's a pretty
I
powerful
know
book.
it's a lot. It's a mouthful, but
It is.
yeah, it covers that 25-year relationship and just really delves into, I am very, very raw and open in this book. Everything that was going on in my mind, in my body, every thought I had while I was in that situation. And some of it isn't nice. And, it takes two to create a dynamic. But I think a lot of people have related to it. And I've been, the real point of it was just expressing to people, a few things, that there is a mind body connection. You're going to have physical reactions. And for me, it wasn't good. I have to live with stuff the rest of my life. But since being out of it, it's like miraculously within a month of him being gone and no more stuff happening, I was good. And I'm doing really, really well. But you said it perfectly, and that's always my advice, is it's not so much about warning signs and red flags. It's about how you feel. If your gut is just, if you are not clicking with somebody, don't tolerate it, don't enable it, don't excuse it. If it does not feel right to you, don't force it. We try so hard in these relationships to force stuff, and it's just not meant to be. In my case, I think it was. I had to go through it all so that I could come out here and help other people and relate to them and help them. But yes, definitely, the book is out there, and there's also, a blog on my website, social media, Facebook and Instagram, where people can see stuff. I post content every day to help people heal, to help people laugh about their situation. But I also post some resources, because that's the one thing I want people to take away. If you are in a situation, the one mistake that I made that would have helped me and that will help anyone is to make a report. You don't have to call 911. You can even go the next day or a week later and make a report that nobody will come knocking on your door. They won't even know about it, but file that report so there is a paper trail.
Oh, and thank you, because I mean, as you said, keyword resources, and again, we are a resource network, and really the
Yeah.
idea is that not only we'll bring the information, but also the resource. And sometimes that's all people need, like, how to
Yes.
do, what to do, where and who do we contact. And that's important. Your book does have all that, element in it. And
Yes.
hopefully that people can benefit. To your point, your social and all the interactions you have lead to the same thing. And I'm sure there's other women out there, maybe even men actually, that can use the help. And maybe just, again, sometimes we learn from other people's mistakes and lessons in life, and it can help us prevent, and maybe even not even us, maybe it's too late for us, but we can teach others what not
Right.
to do in the future, even not next generation. Because this thing is not, it's just going to continue as long as humans exist. Problems are going to happen, right?
Oh,
It's a
yeah.
tough world that we live in, unfortunately, but it's sad. But so I have a question for you now that you cleared. Is there any relationship that is in the words for you, or that's it, you're done with relationships? Because
No, I'm remarried, actually.
okay.
I never thought in a million years, I had no intention of it. I was going to go be alone like most people do in my situation, and just never again. But somebody that I knew for a long time, I actually knew his family for, gosh, probably 16 or 17 years, just kind of came along, and he helped me through everything, and he was, made his feelings known, and I said, no sir, thank you for the compliment, but no sir, I'm good. I got enough going on. But he stayed by my side, and just it's actually amazing, just out of this beautiful friendship that we had, he's just my person, and we're married, and it's amazing. And the great thing about it, and what I also want people to know, I never thought I was capable of a healthy romantic. I thought, oh, I'm broken, I'm damaged, all these things. And I'm scuffed up a little bit, but I'm able to have this really great marriage with this man, and it's taken some healing and some work on my part, and it's taken some patience and understanding on his. But like we keep saying, it clicked. It was almost too easy, and I'm glad I gave it a shot,
Oh,
because it's been great.
I guess platonic friends do come handy.
Yeah.
you know, I don't know. I don't know if people agree or not, but there's always someone, some male or female that are lingering somewhere, right? But as long as they're supportive, maybe that's
Yeah.
what it is. But here's the good news. Good news is that, and for everyone listening, despite all the hardship that you've experienced, there's still hope that you can still live a better life and healthier life and
Yeah.
happier life, which in this case you are. And that's actually the other thing, because a lot of people will probably just, like, as you said, I was thinking that this is it. I'm just going to live alone. You don't have
Yeah.
necessarily to. You're still young. You can still have a beautiful life ahead, and
Yeah.
maybe even other children. You never know. I mean, it's just a lot of
Oh,
things. Well, I'm not asking, yeah,
for some
but
people, maybe.
but you know what I mean. So again, some people would still want to have kids, but the
Yes.
idea is that it is an important piece to realize that again, after rain and hardship, there's always ease and nice sunshine, and there's always that. So don't lose hope, folks. Hope is a powerful is as powerful as it gets. I mean, try to avoid dilemmas in life and things like that. But again, we can do the best we can. We're still human. We still can make mistakes and get caught up in situations that we don't even want or plan to, but it happens. But in this case, it is a good, ending, of the story. At least, so far, I hope that it stays that way, and I hope that this relationship will remain as it is and continuously, in a positive way. I mean, he's certainly, happy because I think you're happy with him, and
Yeah.
it's different, and I guess he understood this because he's been there for a minute, and and just seeing all the things that you've gone through,
Yes.
but he was in the shadows, and I'm sure he was not very, because if you're telling me this person was narcissistic, your platonic friend would be a little bit remote because he can't be too close, otherwise you'll get under
Yeah.
the fire squad there. So
Exactly. Exactly. But it's
you
nice to know that there were people that did notice and there were people watching out that I didn't know about. So, it all worked out well.
Well, that's idea. I mean, there is nothing that's better than a good, happy, end to a story
Um,
of difficult, and and really, it's what it is. And in this case, we do have that. So, I mean, we've taken the people into a very, gruesome, dark, episode, but then we kind of lighten, the mood. That we can lighten up the mood at the end of
yeah,
the show here. So that's always a good way, to close. But so the book is available, I'm assuming, in Amazon, everywhere where the books are sold.
everywhere books are sold. Yep.
Yeah. All right. And yeah, I mean, listen, it's. I have to tell you, I mean, thank you for the work you do, because not
Thank
everybody is actually. There are thousands, if not millions, of people have endured this, and not all of them have come up to do the work you do because they just don't want to deal with it. But you are facing it in a way that is a good, healthy place. I think most of
you.
therapists will tell you it's a good thing you're talking about it more and more to get it out of the system. And you actually put it in a book, which means it's all out. And that's the other thing. You don't hold things in. You got to let them out. And you've done all those things. And again, as I said, I'm not an expert, but I've had enough discussions to know a few tricks here and there. And it's always good to talk about things and get it out of your system.
Yep.
You discharge all that negative vibe and frequency, and you did that. And not only that, now you're also doing something positive and, resourceful for others. There is some, real, I guess, satisfaction to that. And, obviously there's a reward, that comes with that feeling, right? So your I guess your hardship now is causing some peace to others, and that's what it is. You're the martyr. You sacrifice,
Exactly.
for the rest, but it's not like you planned it that way, but it worked out, at the end, and so that's what we would like to hear. Well, listen, we're coming to the end of the show, so any words of wisdom to close, our show today, for our audiences, what would you tell them?
I just think the biggest thing that I have learned is it's okay to be who you are. You're not going to be for everybody, not even your mother sometimes, or some of your family, maybe not even for the person you're married to. You might be too much for some, not enough for others, but you're just right for the people that will come into your life who love you. So just don't force things. If you have to force it, it's probably not a good idea. It's probably not worth pursuing. So just be you. It's okay to be whoever you are, no matter what your strengths and weaknesses. You're perfect exactly as you are.
You have it, folks. Perfect, close up, for the show here. So thank you so much, Dana, for being with us and for really sharing your story and your resources and your information. And definitely, I will have the link of your website in the description of the show so people can actually connect with you directly. And of course, then they can take it from there in social and so on and so forth. And yes, if you guys want to read the book, it may be a great way to learn. And I'm sure it's going to be entertaining in a way, and it's a suspenseful
Yeah,
book. I mean, it's like one of those Agatha Christie's, system, where you like there's a
yes,
lot of crazy stuff going on there. I mean, no murder, thank God, but there is more of that. I'm sure the way you described it, there's plenty of stuff that is a lot
oh
more
yeah,
difficult to read. What? Not difficult to hear, but maybe like reading it would be like emotional and drives people into like excitement. So there's
yeah,
exciting stuff in there. So yeah, do check the book out, and certainly, folks, if you know someone who's suffering stuff, try to lend a hand. It's always an important thing. Sometimes they can't speak, but if you can speak, do so. You never know who you can save, and that's always something you can do. And or, I mean, whatever you can do, at least, give the resources. That's all I have to say. Um, all right. Well, so Dana, thank you so much for being with us today. I really enjoyed this discussion and exchange, and I learned a lot myself, and definitely something that we can help our people and audiences and listeners everywhere in the world. And by the way, this is worldwide, folks. So not just in the States. These things happen anywhere, everywhere on this blue planet of ours. You can all know someone that may be going through this, and maybe you can help them. That being said, I'm Hurricane H. This is the end of the show. We'll be talking soon. New day, new show, new topic, new guest.